Good morning. I'm the 100 Proof News Hound here presenting another episode of the 100 Years and More show. And this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to tell you the story of roller coasters. And everything anyone needs to know about the history of roller coasters is contained in this book. And I'm 99.75% sure that everything you're about to hear today is accurate and tells you the true story of the history of roller coasters. Now, remember, hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're trying to build the channel, and that would help us out a lot here. But let's jump in here. We're going to use that old sports radio trope of Mount Rushmore. They have the Mount Rushmore of hitters, the Mount Rushmore of this or that. This is the Mount Rushmore of roller coaster pioneers. And in this particular story, we're going to show how where it all began is fitting, considering where roller coasters have taken us. And so we'll look for that tie-in at the end. Now, if you go back into the history of roller coasters, you got to really start back in the 17th century, and believe it or not, 17th century in Russia. St. Petersburg, as a matter of fact, the capital of Russia at that time. From 1750 to about 1790, the Russian czars actually had a thing called the Russian Mountain. It was a wooden structure, large wooden structure that contained large amounts of ice in winter, and had as many as 5 different paths that one could go down on sleds. It was a gravity-propelled system, technically roller coaster-like, but it was merely a novelty. It was a novelty for the upper classes, such as existed in Russia at the time. And when there was a change in the Tsar in the 1790s, they took the system down. And there were no more major gravity-propelled devices in Europe until 1817, where in Paris, a couple of them went up, the Montagne de Belleville and the Promenade Ariens. These were actually, if you look at them, actually very similar to a modern roller coaster. What you had there was a ratchet, pull the cart up to the top of the hill to a pavilion, then the carts would be released and go down the outside of the track at a very high rate of speed. Apparently it was quite thrilling, and you would end up down at the bottom and then repeat the cycle. Again, though, that was viewed as a novelty for the upper classes, and it never took off after the first couple of years, and they were also disassembled. But they were a novelty enough, they got the attention of Tom Moore, who basically was the poet laureate of Ireland at the time. He wrote a humorous long poem called "The Fudge Family in Paris," and he deals with the issue of the roller coaster. He says in this poem of 1818, which is reproduced here from, and you got to get a load of this. The newspaper that it's out of was the Peterborough, Long Sutton, Dunham Market, Swaffham, Mildenhall, Saffron, Walden, Baldock, Hitching, Buntingford, and Bishop Stortford Advertiser. No wonder nothing ever gets done in England. But anyways, here's what Tom Moore had to say about the roller coaster. Last night at the Beaujon, and that's the park, a place where I doubt if I well can describe, there are cars that set out from a lighted pavilion high up in the air and rattle you down, doll you hardly know where. These vehicles mind me in which we go through this delightful, dangerous journey hold too. Some cavalier asks with humility whether you'll venture down with him. You smile, it's a match. And in an instant you're seated and down you go together. Go thundering as if you went post to Old Scratch. So they're describing the mechanisms of a roller coaster, but note who we've got here, a cavalier and a lady. Again, novelties of the upper class, not being designed as businesses, than anything that I could think that I could make out of this. And it ran for a couple years in Paris and then was no longer there. Now, it's funny. One of the contrasting things that we're going to show here is that in the United States, right from the get-go, roller coasters are looked at as businesses. Not so in Europe. In Europe, they're looked at as novelties and, subject of romantic poems. They had the technology, though. In the 1840s in England, there's a crazy thing called the Grand Centrifugal Railway. Hopefully you got a picture of that up in front of you right now. But the Grand Centrifugal Railway was in fact a coaster with an inversion. Starts off about 50 feet in the air. two people in a cart. The cart goes down the ramp, does an inversion of about 40 feet, and then continues on up to a 45-foot platform. Apparently, hitting 100 miles an hour. This is from the London Morning Post of Wednesday, July 6th, 1842. Extraordinary novelty, grand centrifugal railway, 200 feet long, vertical circle upwards of 40 feet in circumference, in which a carriage of nearly 200 pounds, containing a lady and a gentleman, descends an inclined plane, passing around a vertical circle of 40 feet, turning the head of the individual downward and feet in the air, and the carriage then descends the circle, rises on a second inclined plane, which lands the individual safe at the rate of 100 miles an hour. Wow, that seems like one of the more unsafe things that I've ever heard of. It ran for a couple of years. I have no record of it ever killing anybody, but it certainly could have. Anyway, nothing became of the European experiments. They had the technology to develop roller coasters in the modern sense, including inversion technology, which it doesn't appear in American roller coasters until the 1960s, but they did nothing with it. Now, in an article in the Indianapolis News on October 3rd, 1884, in response to what we're going to show you now, the proliferation of roller coasters in America, this Francophile apologist writes basically wants to throw some shade on American roller coasters. Here's what he says. The roller coaster seems to generally considered a novel invention. It is certainly a pleasant one, but the idea of this is 200 years old. Artificial elevations for rapid descent on sledges were made by the Russians on the ice of the Neva at the time of Peter the Great. The roller coaster is only a wooden substitute made circular instead of straight. 70 years ago, the French made roller coasters, and that's the one we're referring to here in the poem, of wood, just like ours, only better probably. Of course they're better. I love guys that like to rip the United States. In having 3 or 4 ascents and descents in their course, the impetus of each descent sufficient to drive the little car up the next rather reduced elevation. So they get there. Each hill is subsequently a little smaller, and continuing thus to the end where the car was taken to the starting point and lifted directly up the track. He then references the same poem that we read from 7 years before, and he concludes, the roller coaster car of 1815 was a sort of flirting convenience, apparently, as well as the means of pleasant and rather exciting diversions. The roller coaster is no novelty, in fact, wherever it may be to this generation or this country. But that's the point. They had it. It was there. They don't have it now. That's kind of like Rome had a Colosseum, but it ain't there now. And it's what you do with it, all right? The concept of gravity propelling an object is thousands of years old. What do you do with it? Well, I'm going to show you what the Americans did. It all begins in Toledo, Ohio. That's it. And it's not even disputable. It actually begins in Toledo, Ohio, in September of 1883 at a thing called the Tri-State Fair. Here we are, the Steuben Republican of September 19th, 1883. The Tri-State Fair at Toledo was attended by a few of the people of Butler. The roller coaster was the chief attraction of the fair. This is a small improvement of the old-time sport of riding down a hill. It consists of a railing on a circular inclined plane upon which a long bench-like car is placed, and being filled with 15 or 20 persons is pushed off, and it makes the circuit of 600 feet in about 12 seconds, attaining a speed of more than a mile a minute. At 60 miles an hour, an object is moving 88 feet per second. When you do the math, this thing is probably traveling between 30 and 40 miles per hour at its fastest, which is darn fast. It's faster than a horse can run, and it's certainly fast enough to kill you if it leaves the track or you leave the car. What's amazing is this. If you'd gone back to the summer of 1883, just before the Toledo Fair, and you had asked any of the 100 million people in the United States, what is a roller coaster? Nobody would have known. They would have looked at you blankly. So in the summer of 1883, nobody has an idea of the concept of a roller coaster. But we're going to show you here, but by the fall of 1884, only a year later, almost everyone in America would know what a roller coaster is. And as a matter of fact, there'd be operating roller coasters in almost every major city. How could this happen? Well, it happened fast, and it happened so fast. Let's have a look at this. September 19th, 1883, it opens at the Tri-State Fair in Toledo. 10 days later, on September 29th, in St. Louis, you have a series of articles in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. Here's the first one. The roller coaster is the greatest novel invention of the age, and all should try it. coasting on a circle of 500 feet and free from any danger. Good luck with that. Only 5 cents a ride. Will open at 3 p.m. today at the corner of Lucas Place and 20th Street. So 10 days after the first roller coaster, we now have a second roller coaster in St. Louis. Same day, another ad. Roller coaster, the old-fashioned sleigh ride. Don't fail to take a ride. Lucas Place and 20th. And finally, the third ad in the same newspaper, dead loads of fun at the roller coaster, corner of Lucas Place and 20th Street. I'm not sure I would have referred to it as dead loads of fun, but they did. But notice what we're doing here. We're marketing. We're actively marketing a product, all right? This is the difference. This is one of the main differences. The roller coasters as built in Europe were seen as novelties for the upper and upper middle classes. They were never seen as a money-making venture per se. Here what we've got, we're building roller coasters, and the price point's a nickel, which is today $1.50, all right? So what that means is that every street urchin, every kid who's got a grimy nickel in his grimy hand is your potential customer. At a nickel price point, you know that he can go back and bother his mother, bother his dad, try to get 25 cents out of them so they can go down and have rides on the roller coaster. This is a money-making proposition from the get-go. And I think they got a pretty good understanding of their market. Now, we've already had Toledo and we've had St. Louis. One day later, Chicago Tribune, roller coasting, a new South Side amusement. A curious structure is now in course of construction on the large vacant lot at the southwest corner of State and 22nd Streets. It will be known as the roller coaster. Notice it's the roller coaster from day one here. And the objects claimed for it are health and amusement. The erection is composed almost entirely of lumber and is built on trestles rising from the ground to a height of 22 feet. Notice how precise it is. It is circular in form with a diameter of being 140 feet and the circumference of 430 feet. The width of this track is about 2 feet, on which are lines of iron rails on which 6 cars will run in sections of 2 each. So tandem cars, 1, 2, 3 of those, so 6 cars in total operating on the track at any one time. They will start from the highest point of the track and running down will be impelled by their own weight, reaching a velocity that will bring them up the incline to a large platform in the space of 18 seconds. The sides of the tracks have included balustrades as a protection against the cars running off. The charge will be 5 cents for riding around the circuit 3 times. Then, it notes here, the structure is being built by P.M. Stevenson, and we'll tell you who he is, of Toledo, Ohio, who has already erected 2 coasters in that city and is going to put up another one in New Orleans forthwith. So now we've got a second Toledo coaster and a coaster going in New Orleans. The cost is about $800 to build these original coasters, and Mr. E.C. Hudson of Toledo, Ohio is the manager of them. He noted that the first coaster erected was simply an experiment, but instantly proved a great success. The work was begun on the 18th last, and it is expected that the coaster will be completely in running order by next Wednesday. Look how fast this is moving. It goes from an idea to a working device in less than 2 weeks. This is interesting here. That article was on September 30th, 1883. The week before, on September 23rd, 1883, in the Tribune of Chicago, there was an ad. Wanted a man to act as a manager of a roller coaster. Salary $20 per week. Must deposit $500 as security. I don't know whether they thought it was going to run away with the roller coaster or not. Apply at the southwest corner of 22nd and State Street to Mr. E.C. Hudson, who's referenced in the other ad or other article. So, can you imagine being the person you're applying for a job? You don't know what it is. When they say roller coaster, they may as well have said moon landing unit. You have no idea what a roller coaster is, but hope Mr. Hudson got his man, because the roller coaster certainly went up and was very successful. Now, he had mentioned that they were about to put one in New Orleans. Times-Picayune, Tuesday, November 13th, 1883. Sleigh ride without snow. A new attraction at the southwest corner of St. Charles Avenue and Josephine Street is the roller coaster, which runs on a circular track of 580 feet. It seems like they have 2 versions here, a 430-footer and a 580-footer, and it's elevated about 21 feet at either end. Notice the other one for the shorter track was at 20 feet. This is now at 21. The descent is very rapid for about 200 feet, the grade growing less and less till it becomes level. Then a gradual ascent takes place, carrying the car back to the point of departure, which is 21 feet. The trip around the curve is accomplished in 10.5 seconds, and the sensation is if one were flying through the air. I did the math on that. It's around 40 miles an hour. They're not doing 60, but 40 in an open wooden car. Pretty wild. It says here that the coach seats from 15 to 20 persons, and they note that it's fun to see it start from the highest elevation and greater fun to be on it when it rushes down the sharp descent, which gives it impetus to overcome the rising grade. There can be no more healthful exercise than this rapid ride in the fresh air of the evening. So how did this all happen? Well, you can piece it all together through a variety of other articles, but there's one article conveniently that summarizes all the action. And that was in the Minneapolis Tribune of August 5th, 1884. They're looking back from the year before and summarizing what's gone on in the world of roller coaster, this new device. All right, I mentioned that we wanted to do this like Mount Rushmore. Well, here's your George Washington, a fellow by the name of Alanson Wood of Toledo, Ohio. On August 5th, 1883, he patents something called the Circular Gravity Railway. And it is, in fact, that 400-foot circle, 20 feet up from the highest point. He patents that, and he's smart enough to know that he can design it, but he ain't got the money, and he hasn't got the building experience to actually turn his idea into reality. And accomplish that, he sells half the patent to one Joseph A. Cahoon, and you're going to see him down the road here. Joseph A. Cahoon is your Thomas Jefferson. He's the entrepreneur, money man who's going to bankroll this whole thing. Okay. Wood sells half of his patent to Cahoon, but he maintains the 50% ownership and royalty rights to any subsequent sales. You need a technical guy, though. You need a builder, and Cahoon partners up with Philo M. Stevens. What a great name, Philo. Philo. We're going to call him Philo M. Stevens. He partners up, and he's responsible for building the first roller coaster at the Tri-State Fair. That one was 16 feet long, 15 to 20 people in the ride, and they claimed it could go 60, but again, it's a 30 to 40 miler. And you know what they called the roller coaster when they set it up at the Tri-State Fair? The roller coaster. It's noted in this article that you could build a roller coaster right now for $800, but you could sell one if you had one in an operating condition. You could sell one for $8,000. So these are potentially very good investments. Now, again, what separates the American experience from the European experience? In a short word, it's a business. But beyond that, it's the law and the use of the law to protect your business. They take the people who running the roller coaster consortium here are extremely they're extremely aggressively prudent. What they do, first off, they incorporate. The Chicago Tribune notes on November 7th, 1883, that the Roller Coaster Company of America, with capital of $1 million, was incorporated yesterday in the city of Chicago. They didn't have $1 million. But by incorporating, you get many different protections. It allows you limited liability. There's reasons. We're not going to teach a corporate law class here, but there are reasons why you incorporate, and they take advantage of it. They also use we've seen that they use the concept of patents. Wood had taken out an original patent, but on October 16th, 1883, Stevens takes out another patent for an improvement on the Wood patent, and he refers to it as his roller coasting device. So, like I said, we got Wood is your Washington. You got Cahoon is your Jefferson. Stevens is your Lincoln. There's one face left to be placed on Mount Rushmore. We'll get to him in just a moment. The article in the Minneapolis Tribune goes on to say that there are now 3 roller coasters built in Toledo, and that there were operating coasters, as we know, in St. Louis and New Orleans. And interestingly, says that they are now in every major city of the South. We'll get to that in just a second, but they're everywhere. It's because the concept of a roller coaster, which didn't exist a year ago, is now a reality in almost every major American city. Now, the fourth guy, we'll mention him right now. The fourth person that's going to be on our Mount Rushmore is Lamarcus Adna Thompson. And if you go and look in Wikipedia, or if you just do a cursory search of the internet, almost every person, every site names Lamarcus Adna Thompson as the inventor of the roller coaster. I refer to it as he's our Abner Doubleday. He's the Abner Doubleday of roller coasters. And if you go back to my video on the history of baseball, you'll see Abner Doubleday got all the credit, but didn't do anything with respect to baseball. Now, Lamarcus Adna Thompson did not invent roller coasters, and he did not even ever build a roller coaster. What he built, and he should get credit for this, is it's akin to roller coasters. It's a scenic railway. What he did was he used the principle of a switchback railway. A switchback railway is a 2-part system. You ride down on gravity, Then you get to the other end. Then to come back, the cars are bodily moved to another track which is running parallel, and then you ride back on the switchback. It switches and comes back. That's what he set up in Coney Island in 1885 and patented the switchback railway. And his switchback railways were actually more they were Disney-esque. He would have tunnels and the tunnels would all be painted with a theme inside. So you might go through a tunnel where it was ancient Rome, and you could go through a tunnel that was cowboys and Native Americans, and you could go through another tunnel and it's the Far East. It's kind of like It's a Small World. He did that. They became the most popular rides at Coney Island, but not roller coasters. They're scenic railways, which are cool in their own right, but they're different. But let's give him the Teddy Roosevelt fourth position on our Mount Rushmore of roller coasters. So we now know that the original guys there have got their concept patented. They have incorporated. What do you got to do next? Well, you got to litigate. That's the law. If someone infringes on your patent, you got to litigate. And darn if they don't. Here we go. Savannah Morning News, February 1st, 1884. Persons are warned not to invest in the roller coaster now in operation here, as it is an infringement upon my patent. I will be here soon to investigate. J.A. Cahoon, proprietor. So they sent Cahoon out to track down guys that are building roller coasters without paying the appropriate royalties. So how do you turn it into money? You've incorporated, you've patented it. You're scaring off guys that are infringing on your patents. Well, you franchise it, right? Here we go. The Times Democrat, New Orleans, Louisiana, April 13th, 1884. Coaster, large profits on small investments. For sale, patent rights for Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Minden, Vicksburg, Natchez, Jackson, Biloxi, and other towns in Louisiana and Mississippi. That's what you do. It's McDonald's. You franchise it. Did it work? Well, did it work? Well, let's look at the same day, April 1884 in the Times-Picayune. The business of General Peter Tracy in New Orleans last week was to secure the roller coaster for Memphis, Tennessee. The Avalanche says the general was successful. So he came down here and negotiated, probably with Cahoon, got a franchise, which means he can build it in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, while he's trying to build his, there's some other things going in here. February 28th, 1884, the roller coaster at the Springs in San Antonio is now run by Sulzbacher and Martin, and it's being pretty well patronized. Then April 1884, in the Public Ledger of Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Thompson has arrived to put up the roller coaster. So that must be Mr. Tracy's roller coaster. But where is Mr. Tracy going to build his roller coaster? Well, according to the Times-Picayune, Peter Tracy on the Bluff, it says here, April 15th, 1884. Mr. Peter Tracy petitioned the council yesterday for the use of the Chickasaw Bluff on the Mississippi River for a roller coaster. He says he asked leave to erect on that part of the unoccupied bluff facing the river between Monroe Street and Union Street what is called and known as a roller coaster for the period of 1 year, such as now it is in use in New Orleans for some weeks, to the great delight of the inhabitants. Get a load of that, though. The one in New Orleans is in use for just a few weeks, and already they're moving to secure the rights and to get the rights for the land from the city. They don't wait for anything in 19th century America here. He notes that the roller coaster is a very simple method of amusement from which persons of all age derive benefit and enjoyment, and cannot fail to be endorsed by the people here as it has so hardly been by those in New Orleans, Jacksonville, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, and Toledo, Ohio. And there is now also in the course of construction one at Cincinnati, Ohio. They're going in everywhere, and we're talking about 6 months from when the concept of a roller coaster was first born. And that kind of quick action is noted in the Kansas Herald of Lawrence, Kansas on July 8, 1884. The roller coaster is a new thing, having only been patented last January, but has already become very popular in other places. 3 are in use in New Orleans, 1 in Galveston, Texas, and 1 is being built at Coney Island, which will cost $5,000. So they must be building a heck of a one on Coney Island. I don't think that they're referencing the Mr. Thompson Switchback Railway. It probably is a legitimate roller coaster there, but we don't have any news articles on that particular device. More entrepreneurs are involved here. July 8, 1884, Lawrence, Kansas, a petition of George Burchard and Reuben Searle to close the south half of the city park between Winthrop and Henry Streets for erecting thereon a roller coaster and an ice cream refreshment garden was referred to committee. So they've come up with the bright idea in Lawrence, Kansas, that we're going to take half of the city park and turn it into our own amusement park. And darn it if they're not successful. July 11th, 1884, the city council has granted Monsieur Chardin Surly permission to establish a roller coaster in the park. So they're going to set up their own roller coaster in the city park in Kansas. Now, here's something I didn't expect to find. As a matter of fact, it's almost shocking. June 3rd, 1884, Daily News, London. There's a roller coaster in London, England. And the roller coaster in London, England is actually installed before the Switchback Railway at Coney Island, which comes in on June 16th. Didn't have any idea. They're referencing, the article references the goings-on secondary to a bank holiday, so everyone's got the day off. And they note, to the familiar recreations was added an American novelty in the shape of a roller coaster. The excitement of coasting greatly took the fancy of that portion of the British public who patronized the palace. And although the cost of each ride was fixed at what seemed to be a somewhat prohibitive price of 3p, there was an extraordinary demand for the privilege of enjoying the new sensation. The slopes upon which the British experiment at coasting are tried are purely artificial. They consist of a circular wooden staging erected at considerable height from the ground. The sleds run on rails down the steeply inclined platform and rise halfway up the other side of the circle. The sensation of the rapid descent is apparently highly amusing to the crowd, and for the time being, this novelty seems fairly to have eclipsed the old-fashioned merry-go-round. So we've got operating roller coasters in London, England, before they're in New York City. But nothing happened that I'm aware of. I mean, they've got roller coasters now in Blackpool and things like that in England. But I don't think they've had continuous operation of roller coasters in London since 1884. But it was interesting to see that they tried. But it's just not. I don't think it's for the British. Now, lots of things you can do on a roller coaster, a lot of them unsafe. This is interesting. This is in Akron, Ohio, and they're describing what there's a dance pavilion in the city park. And they also have built a roller coaster in the city park. So let's see how those work together. 20 dances were gone through in the pavilion to the music of the Italian orchestra. A supper was served at intermission. The roller coaster was made good. Oh, the roller coaster was made good use of. Pretty feature of the evening's enjoyment was the letting off of Roman candles by the dancers while riding on the coaster. What could go wrong? Setting off fireworks while you're riding on a wooden roller coaster at 40 miles an hour. Roller coasters, while they're a lot of fun, they do create kind of a nuisance. Remember, these are not being installed at amusement parks. These are being installed in city parks, vacant lots, wherever they can. Times-Picayune, November 24th, 1883. The children a chance. There have been some complaints against the noise occasioned by the running of the roller coasters. It does not seem to be sufficiently annoying to justify the abolition of this innocent form of amusement. Of course, where children play and have fun, there will be laughter, and the laughter and shouts will necessarily supervene. But why not bear with them for a while they're having such a good time? To rob them of this chance for healthful exercise would be almost cruel. The roller coaster creates no more disturbance than the city cars on St. Charles Avenue and only runs for about 4 hours every evening. The residents in that vicinity are asked to reconsider their supposed grievance and let the children have their fun, as well they should. Now, you know what? There's a theme that runs through almost all of my episodes. All of them. In 19th and early 20th century America, if something's going to get done, if there's going to be innovation, it's going to take place in the heartland. It's going to take place in what they referred to as the West. And the West is everything from Pittsburgh to St. Louis. That's the area where innovation occurs. New York City exists really to finance everything. New York City is a finance hub, but nothing new really comes out of New York City. They've got the money, and you got to go to New York, sometimes hat in hand, to get the financing for your project. But they're money guys. They're lawyers, accountants. They're lawyers and accountants. It's a city run by and for money. They tend to get the credit for a lot of stuff, though, and one of the things was credit for roller coasters at Coney Island. The first mention that we have of a roller coaster at Coney Island does not occur until the Brooklyn Daily Times of July 8th, 1884. So basically a full year from when roller coasters were already a big thing in the West. It's noted at the Sea Beach Palace restaurant, the Rhode Island clams have arrived, and Mr. Wilcox waves guests to their seats in a graceful manner, while his eyes turn regretfully to the roller coaster, where he had such a good time with the boys and girls on Sunday when his clams lay on the dock so many miles away. So it's referenced. Now, obviously, the roller coaster has been in operation, but it's not such a big thing that anybody cares. It didn't hit the newspapers. On August 11th, 1884, it's noted merry-go-rounds, pitching ships, roller coasters, popcorn men, and other fakirs, too numerous to mention, carried their money home in a trunk last night. One roller coaster man said he took in over $500 yesterday. This is big business. $500, if true, is like $15,000 for a day of work. Well, we know that in the Minneapolis Tribune article, they had mentioned that a good roller coaster could gross $1,500 a week. It seems in line. If that's their big day, they got $500. Even at Coney Island, though, they know you've got to protect your rights. If you're going to make money on the idea of a coaster, you better have your patents in place. This is from the Brooklyn Eagle, April 6, 1885. The roller coasters on the Sea Beach property will be the only ones in the island this year. So says Mr. Thompson, who now controls the patent. So his Switchback Railway, he's got patents on that, and he's been patenting a couple other devices, and he's going to enforce his patents, and you're going to have to go through him if you want to set up a roller coaster at Coney Island. Now, roller coasters, we've been referencing the fact that roller coasters move very quickly, and they're made out of wood. And remember, these things aren't put together by guys from MIT at this point in time. They're just eyeballing these things. So there's bound to be, at some point in time, an accident. Now, here's the first people who die on a roller coaster. And strangely, though, they didn't die on the roller coaster. They died on the platform. Let's get into it. This is April 15th and April 16th, 1885, Dayton Herald, Dayton, Ohio. 25 school children were upon the platform of the new roller coaster today when the floor gave way, precipitating them 20 feet to the ground. 3 boys were seriously injured, 1 fatally, and 6 or 8 others were hurt. Then they had to update that. Roller coaster platform broke under a test at Toledo, Ohio, and Eddie Waldvogel, 13, Eddie Cottrell, 11, and Sam Jordan, 9, will die. So they're still alive, but they will die. Terms you won't see in a newspaper anymore. It's just the modern world. If you get to the hospital and you're still alive, there's a really good chance that you're going to live. The trauma centers are generally that good. Back here, though, there's probably a million ways you could be taken out, and they knew that these little guys were going to die. Yeah, there were guys. There were lots of roller coaster fatalities, and the roller coaster fatalities generally fit into one of 2 categories. Either the person who died is an idiot and is not obeying instructions, and we'll get into those, or there's a catastrophic failure of the cars on the roller coaster and they leave the tracks. Well, here's one here. Monday, September 4th, 1911, roller coaster causes deaths. Well, let's see which kind this one was. 2 persons were killed and a dozen others were hurt this evening when the last car of a 3-car train of the giant roller coaster at Coney Island left the rails. It lists the dead, and it says here, the dead and 3 most seriously injured people were hurled out of the car over the side of the track into the ground, a distance at that point of about 80 feet. So that's a catastrophic failure of the roller coaster itself. But then you can contrast this with the Evening Vanguard of Venice, California, June 1, 1915. Fall from roller coaster brings death. Fails to heed warning, stands up while car is in motion, loses balance, rounding sharp curve and falls backward, dies at hospital half an hour later. Well, that's the other kind. And remember, like we said, they aren't MIT guys designing the roller coasters. They've got no experience with safety equipment, very little experience with respect to maintenance and issues of metal fatigue, things like that. That'll all come in the 20th century, but in the late 19th and early 20th century, it's really trial and error. And the problem is that the error generally results in death. One of the worst tragedies occurred on May 22nd, 1922. 9 thrown out of roller coaster. The Anienta Star of Anienta, New York. 3 deaths likely to result from accident at Bronx Amusement Park. 1 man was killed and 6 men and 2 women were injured when they were hurled from a roller coaster car at Starlight Park, a Bronx amusement resort. Henry Spitz died from a fractured skull, and 2 of the others have slight chances for recovery. According to the witnesses, 2 persons in the front of the car stood up as it shot around the second turn of the slide 55 feet in the air and were thrown out when the safety bar broke under their weight. As the operator, Neil Connolly, clamped on the brakes, the others were flung into space. So here we have a hybrid. We have idiots standing up, and we have a failure of the bracing system on the roller coaster itself, resulting in 3 deaths and 6 other seriously injured. So how do you affect reform in the United States? And this is all part of the self-regulation of business here. How do you affect reform? Well, this will help. Connolly was arrested and charged with suspicion of homicide and held in $2,500 bail for a hearing Tuesday. So the operator of the roller coaster was arrested and charged with homicide. That will affect change. You do not, as an operator, want to expose yourself to criminal prosecution if your coaster is not up to standards. And so that's one way. How's the other way? Well, the Los Angeles Evening Post of April 26, 1923, headline, $35,736 demanded for roller coaster death. Damages aggregating that amount are asked by Mrs. Lawler, who is suing Lick Pier Santa Monica for the death of her son Joseph Lawler, killed when he fell off a roller coaster. So there's the other thing, civil prosecution. So the threat of criminal or civil prosecution will get people to modify their behaviors. And I know that everybody likes to hate lawyers, but it is still the most effective way to affect change, especially in a developing business and dangerous business like roller coasters. And so there we are. We've got the difference between how Americans and how Europeans dealt with the issue of a roller coaster. One treated it as a novelty and the subject of poetry. The other dealt with it as a deadly serious business and brought all aspects of the law to bear on both maximizing the profits and eventually making it as about as safe a device as one could imagine. It's one of those things like airline safety. Far more people are injured or killed driving to the amusement park than are ever hurt in the amusement park. There were some patented devices that greatly assisted in the safety of roller coastering. The first one that occurred in 1894. They were side friction wheels. This was an invention of Edward Morris. Side friction wheels are wheels that place pressure on the outside of the railroad track on both sides, keeping the car in line and allowing the car to actually hit greater speeds through curves because there's more stability. It also got rid of the need for a brakeman. In a lot of the early roller coasters, you actually had a coaster employee operating as a brakeman, slowing the coaster down at crucial sections of the ride so as it wouldn't leave the track. This obviated the need for that. And you can actually ride one of those types of roller coasters. It still exists. Went in 1902 in Lakemont Park, Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's called Leap the Dips. So if you want to try an early roller coaster, go on Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park. Now, the second major improvement, and this is the one that really led to the transformation of roller coasters in the late 20th century, was the under friction or uplift or upstep modifications. That puts a reinforced wheel below the track and totally prevents the car from leaving the rails. That allows for the safe installation of inversions on your roller coaster. Loop-de-loops and inversions, you can now know that the car is not going to leave the track no matter what happens. Interesting, as an aside, Edward Morris merged his company in the early 20th century with the Philadelphia Toboggan Company. The Philadelphia Toboggan Company probably did more to contribute to the American fun culture than any other company, and is certainly worthy of its own episode, and we'll try to get to that one at some point in time. Now, those modifications, those safety devices, led to the golden age of roller coaster design in the 1920s. It coincided with the Roaring 20s. The golden age of roller coastering in the 20s is when roller coasters took the shape that we now know and love. And while Coney Island certainly did not invent the roller coaster, they did probably have the roller coaster that did more to popularize coastering than any other. And that, of course, is the Cyclone at Coney Island. Cyclone gets built in 1927, and it's a real roller coaster. It's got an 85-foot drop. It hits 60 miles an hour. Now, this is a legit 60 miles an hour. It's at a 58-degree incline or decline. It's a scary decline after the first lift. Its ride time is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's a good ride time. A ride time on a roller coaster should be about the same as a Beatles single, right? 2.5 minutes, 2:40. That's what you should be having. and they get 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and you hit nearly 4 Gs on the ride. It's a great ride. It's still in existence. You should probably ride it if you've got the chance. But it's everything that a roller coaster should be. Now, roller coasters have some trouble though with the Great Depression. They go into decline in the 30s. In order to have fun at an amusement park, you got to have some disposable income. And the 1930s wiped out the concept of disposable income because a lot of guys didn't have any income at all. And that really hurt attendance at amusement parks and led to the closure of many. And roller coasters went into decline. Post-World War II, however, we have a boom. And the boom leads directly into Walt Disney and his Disneyland project. His rides become the first rides to use tubular steel, which is how modern rides are built. They're safer. They're safer. They're fun. It provides the impetus for people to get back in the roller coaster business. And roller coasters again are installed all across the country, including one of my favorites, the Blue Streak in Sandusky, Ohio, at Cedar Point. This is going to bring us this is going to close the circle here. Cedar Point went without a roller coaster for a long time. In 1964, the Blue Streak went in, and it's still in existence here. I first went to Cedar Point in 1966 and first rode the Blue Streak in 1969. Cedar Point now has 18 roller coasters and unquestionably is the roller coaster capital of the world. If you are a serious coaster nut, the quest begins and ends at Cedar Point. There's good coasters everywhere, but nowhere else has a concentration of coasters like Cedar Point. There's 200-footers, 300-footers, 400-footers. There are coasters that will invert you, tie you in knots. They've got coasters for every occasion. The coaster that most exemplifies the modern coaster is the Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. That went in a couple years ago. And it took the place of one of my favorite roller coasters, a wooden roller coaster called the Mean Streak. And what they built at Cedar Point is a hybrid. They're reusing they reused a lot of the wood from the Mean Streak in the basic frame. So to look at it, you think it's wood, but internally it's all steel. It's steel and reinforced. That allows for incredibly high rates of speed and multiple inversions and a ton of airspace. Guys who ride roller coasters love to get air. That's the point where over top of a hill, your body's actually, it rises from the seat. You're hopefully kept in by the safety bar, but you're rising, you're getting air at that point in time. And the Steel Vengeance is all of that. It's 205 feet tall. It's got a 200-foot drop. It drops at vertical. It drops at 90 degrees. You're in free fall. It's got 4 inversions. It runs again, though, in about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the same as a Beatles single. Now that takes us from the beginning to the end, and it's appropriate that we're here at Cedar Point. Cedar Point is less than 50 miles from that old Tri-State Fairgrounds. So where this all began in 1883, if you want to see the best examples of where it took you, you need only go down the road about 45 miles to Sandusky, Ohio, and Cedar Point. Matter of fact, though, I'm going to do something different this year. A couple of guys at the office, we're going to go to We're going to drive to Kingsville, Ontario. We're going to take the ferry. There's a ferry that'll take you across Lake Erie. An hour and 45 minutes gets you to Pelee Island. You can get off there, have a couple glasses of wine, get back on the ferry, another hour and 45 minutes, and you're at Sandusky, Ohio. Stay a couple days in a hotel in the park. Ride every ride you can as many times as you want, and then get back on the ferry and come on home. We're going to try that out later this summer, and if you're a real coaster nut, you might want to do the same. Now, as is my wont, we conclude with a suggestion of a cocktail. And believe it or not, there is a cocktail called the roller coaster. Not a strong cocktail, but it's really fitting for a summer drink. It's the kind of drink you might want to have after you've got back from the park at Cedar Point at the hotel. It consists of 2 parts amaretto and 3 parts grapefruit juice. Now, given that you have juice in this drink, the drink will be shaken, not stirred. So fill the shaker with ice, put the ingredients in, shake vigorously, chill a martini glass, strain the drink into the martini glass, and serve cold. Sounds like an excellent idea. Oh, and remember, got to like and subscribe. Hit the like and subscribe button. We're trying to build the channel, and we hope you enjoyed our trip down roller coasters. And remember, this part's all true. It's verified by the newspapers of the day. We'll be out soon next week with one of our monthly segments, and then we've got some other good ones coming down the pipe. So hang in there, everybody, and we'll see you. Olivia, can you play us out? All right, thanks a lot.